Okay, here I have a couple of stoves. This one here, I think, is a Prentiss-Wabers Auto KampKook Kit, and it is a Model 3, and supposedly, according to that stuff I read on the internet, it's somewhere from 1922 to 1924. Now this one, the single burner, is a Prentiss-Wabers Auto KampKook Kit, and it is a Model 4, and I'm guessing somewhere, because of this structure here, 1920 to 1924, somewhere in there, you know. Inside here. All right, let's open this one up, the big one first. So there's these two guys right here, and the first thing you say is, what are those for? Well, what these are for is the same thing that ridiculous bar on Coleman stoves is for. It's to support the lid. They're lid supports. People in the Coleman world call them towel bars on a Coleman, but of course, obviously this is not up for a towel, and this is how they started out. Okay, this one has a lid support too. A pair of them. Here they are. They go over here and they support the lid. That's what they're for. Okay, just like that weird little bar that comes down on your Coleman. That's actually a lid support, not a towel rack. Although everybody uses them for towel racks. This is a piece of galvanized, as far as I understand. This is original. And we open both these up. And what do we see? Well, the big thing that people get confused about is there's no tube generator like a Coleman. How is that possible? Well, based on the era, I don't know if it was a problem with copyright from Coleman with tube. I have no idea. But there's really no reason to have a generator tube over here. It isn't necessary, and I'll show you how this works. The fuel flows through from the tank right into the bottom here and up into this big chunk of metal, and flows through that metal, which is heated by the flame from the stove. Then it comes out through and divides into this T, out through the jets, each controlled separately. And in the case of our auxiliary burner, the fuel-air mixture mixed there at the jet goes all the way down the tube and out to the burner. Here you can see the metal pan that's underneath that whole structure, and that's what we put our denatured alcohol or white gas in to preheat the stove. The burner on the number 4 has the same setup, same fuel line, same metal block. Everything's pretty much the same. And here's a look at what's underneath that outer cap. You can see it's very much like a traditional silent cap for a kerosene-fueled stove. So the whole point is that these stoves don't use generators in terms of generator tubes like you'd see on most Coleman suitcase stoves, or most Coleman stoves, let's face it. Instead, they rely on a hot block of metal, just like this old blowtorch does. We got Coleman fuel in here, but I've got denatured alcohol because it burns sootlessly with no soot at all, and that's what I want to have here. So I'm preheating this now. You know, as always, preheat takes forever. When our preheat is done, I'll start this blowtorch up for you. Okay, our preheat liquid is almost evaporated. The denatured alcohol is almost gone. I'm going to go ahead and start this up before I run out so I don't have to light it. And you can see it self-lights. So what's happening here is we have a hot piece of metal, we have liquid fuel coming up through this tube into the hot chunk of metal here, following a path this way over here to the jet. The spindle opens and we have vaporized fuel coming out. That's because this entire metal structure acts as a vaporizer block, just like it does in these two stoves. Same deal, same deal. Okay, so then the big thing is, how do you light one of these? Okay, first step is to pressurize the tank. And this fuel cap operates the same way the check valve operates in the bottom of a Coleman stove. There's a little ball in here. You can hear it. There's a little ball. And when you screw it down all the way, like, see, it unscrews. And when you screw it down all the way, it secures the ball just like at the bottom of a Coleman pump tube. So to pump it up, you need an external pump. So this is an external pump, maybe original. I'm not sure if it came with the stove or not. But basically there's a leather pump cup inside and it blows air. So loosen this baby up, put this on top, and this is threaded. And some of these apparently were threaded, mine is not. I don't know, maybe this little nipple on here is supposed to have a hose. Maybe there's a threaded fitting. I don't know. I don't worry about it. It works fine just like this. And we pump up the stove. And there's a fuel, or not a fuel gauge, but a pressure gauge right here on the tank. And it's got a red line on it. So I pump it right up to the red line. And because it's a one-way valve, it doesn't come back out. But we want to secure it down so that there's no leakage there. The pressure gauge registers 15 psi at redline. Okay, we've got the tank pressurized. Now, how do we get this up and running? Because of this big block that needs to be preheated, we have to heat it somehow. And one way to do that would be to open the valve, allow some fuel to flow in here, and then light it. And if you were back in the 1920s, when you were driving around in your old Model T, you maybe would have used that system because back then gasoline was decent and you didn't mind a lot of soot or something like that. Personally, I like to use denatured alcohol, and I just fill this little pan underneath here with my little wash bottle with some denatured alcohol to heat that up and then light it. And you know how this goes. This takes a long time. So I'll speed it up. Okay, our preheat is just now finishing up. There's just a little bit of alcohol left back in the back. And with this stove, we have an accessory burner and a main burner. I'm going to crack the valve on the main burner. And I'm going to let it just kind of simmer just a little bit to make sure things are good and hot and everything's a-okay. Now this is an interesting system. Notice they used keys that were chained. I don't know that this is even an original key or original chain, but they have no actual knobs on this particular model. Just working just fine. Now, do you still have to have this burner running when you use this burner? And the answer is yes, you do, to keep this block hot. But they are independent in that the amount of flow through a non-existent generator tube doesn't in any way affect this. This is a completely separate jet over here. So there's no connection between the two, other than they have the same heat source. So now we're going to let some fuel vapor through here. And we've got our accessory burner going. Let that heat up also. And there, we can open that up. So you don't actually have to have this burner full blast. As long as it's heating up that block, it'll allow this one to continue going by vaporizing the fuel. Yeah, you do have to be careful you don't light it there, because then it'll light inside. So really, you can actually run it this way, which is a different thing than you can do with a Coleman stove. Okay, so that's that one. Let's get the other one going before I fixate in here. Okay, lighting the single burner is the same way. Again, we have the same style fuel cap, so you just open that up. Take your pump. Grab the other one. There we go. And we've brought that up to the same level, to the red line there, and tighten this baby up. And then again, we're going to add alcohol to our preheat pan. And this is a little bit bigger burner, so I like to put a little bit extra in. There's a lot of metal there. And light that guy up. And you know how it goes, takes forever. Okay, just about all the alcohol is now burned away. And there's the last of it right there. And then we simply open the valve and light at the top. And we're good to go. Now, on both stoves, same thing. This flame heats this big chunk of cast iron, which is forming a vaporization block. I don't really think I want to call it a chamber so much as just a block for vaporization. So it's vaporizing in that the fuel as it flows from the tank, goes in there, fuel vaporizes inside this big metal block. And that's what makes it work. Okay, so this is an Optimus 22B. It's a gasoline or white gas fueled stove. And when I say gasoline, you know, back in the day you'd use gasoline. Now you'd use white gas. You know? So the question is, if you had one of those Prentiss-Wabers that has the dual burners and dual preheat blocks, the dual vaporization blocks in them, how would you light the second burner if the first one was already going? Won't it be dangerous putting preheat fuel in the bottom there? Is that going to be a problem? Wouldn't it be like a big explosion? Well, again, the only thing that burns is fuel vapor, not liquid fuel. So putting liquid fuel in here should be okay if you light it pretty quickly. If, however, you let it sit around for a while, eventually some vapor may drift over and all that vapor would go woof, and that would be it. And I'm going to try to simulate that. Let's try it. I'm putting denatured alcohol in this cup right here. And granted, I have some felt in the bottom to absorb some of it. But now I'm going to try to get my fumes to ignite. Whoa, fumes! Fumes! Let's get those fumes to ignite. So the assumption here is that this alcohol is vaporizing, but it hasn't ignited. Why is that? Well, the reason is because the exact proportions necessary to ignite aren't just not happening anywhere around here, anywhere near this flame. The only place they're probably happening where it's rich enough, mixing with the air, the vapor from the alcohol, which is evaporating, the only place it's rich enough to actually ignite is probably right over here. I'm trying to get my fumes over there. It's not helping. So apparently the vaporized alcohol that's coming off of here is too lean to ignite, just as it would be if you were using Coleman fuel or actual gasoline. It's going to be too lean to ignite, except right close to here, which is why when I take my torch, look, now it ignites. Now it ignites. So is there a worry about igniting one burner next to the other? Well, I'd say no. There is no worry. Don't sweat it. It's not a problem. And in fact, you look at this stove, wouldn't you be doing that all the time? I know I do. So not a worry to have two Prentiss-Wabers Auto KampKook burners, independent, with their vaporization blocks needing to be preheated. If you've got one going, don't sweat it. Just ignite the other one. Just try not to squirt fuel onto your burner that's actually burning, and you'll be fine. I'll come back to this after the other one started, because everybody loves flame. Okay, and as you can see, we're up and running. You'll just have to take my word that during the absence, while you were waiting, there was no explosions or anything. It's just perfectly okay to preheat one burner while you're running another burner. It's not a problem. Again, because fuel has to be a vapor in order to burn. In order for fuel to burn, it has to be a vapor, also known as a gas. It has to evaporate, and it also has to mix with oxygen in the air in the proper proportions. If it doesn't mix with oxygen, it won't burn either. And it has to be in the proper proportions. If it's too rich, if it's too lean, it won't burn. So, everybody settle down about using white gas. White gas is pretty doggone safe, okay? Just be sensible. All right.